He mailed me an envelope demanding $50,000 for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. My heart sank for a moment, but years of sacrifice had already taught me how to stand tall. Quietly, I built a paper trail, one folder, one proof, one line that said, if I didn't sign it, I won't pay it. That was only the beginning of a battle where dignity, not money, would decide the ending. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The rain pressed a thin gray film against my kitchen window, beating on the glass like it meant to stay. I warmed my hands around the kettle while it hissed, letting the sound keep time with my breath. On the table lay a beige envelope thick as a grudge. My name stood where Mom used to live, Mrs. Maura Kelly, printed in clean black letters that made me feel like a distant cousin from a family I didn't recognize. Gold foil initials glinted in the corner. The return address was embossed the way Banks D. I traced the edge with my thumb and set it down. 1, 2, 3 breaths. I opened it on 4. Paper can erase a person without raising a voice. The sheet slid out heavy stock, the kind you choose when you want your words to wear a suit. Invoice, the header said. Below planning retainer, vendor upgrades, imported linens, live band overtime, reception extras, gratuity estimates, honeymoon deposit, Amalfi itinerary. At the bottom, a total $50,000 due in 30 days. A handwritten note slanted and careful cut deeper than the number. You should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute. No mom, no invitation, no sentence that began with, would you? The mug slipped from my fingers, a dull ceramic gasp against the tile. Coffee spread in a slow brown ring around my slippers, then fanned into little tributaries that found every gap in the grout. I didn't rush. I watched how far it wanted to go. The invoice said their names Jodi Kelly and Adnan Farouk, my daughter and her fiancé. I leaned against the counter until the kettle clicked itself quiet, then turned off the burner, grabbed towels, and knelt. 66 does not love cold floors, but it teaches you how to move on them. I lifted the shards into the trash, blotted the ring, and set the paper on a dry placemat where the light could read it with me. In the hallway mirror, a foggy oval of me waited. I didn't look younger or older. I looked sharper, like the room had trimmed me to essentials. Silver hair pulled back shoulders squared the blue vein at my temple, steady as a tide mark. 3 years of widowhood had taught me practical graces. Keep a list, pay the bill that keeps the heat on, don't buy 2 of anything you only use once. Richard left memories and obligations in uneven stacks. I sorted them, paid what was mine, and learned the price of quiz. Belonging is not something I purchase. If I'm erased, I do not fund the ink. I cleaned the last line of coffee, folded the invoice along its factory crease, and slid it into a clear sleeve. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my old laptop. The screen woke like an old dog, slow but willing. New folder reception proof. I photographed the envelope and the invoice with my phone. Airdropped the files, named them with the date and time added, original, so later copies wouldn't pretend to be first. I wrote a title at the top of a ruled pad, Who Signs Pays. Highlighters, sticky tabs, a pen with good ink. I drew columns vendor, deposit, balance due, deadline, contact, contract holder. The shape of a plan steadied my hands. I added a line above the columns in block letters, if I didn't sign, I don't pay. On the second sheet, I listed what I didn't know who the planner was, which vendors expected family to pick up balances, what the venue required before service. No speeches, no ultimatums. Questions first. My calendar shows the metro routes like other people mark birthdays. I checked the bus to Bellevue, where most planners office out of glass buildings with nice lobby ficuses. The 550 would get me close enough to walk. I set reminders, bring ID, small notebook, phone-charged, portable battery, a calm face. I laid my driver's license on the table the way you show a card before a game begins. From the drawer, I took a frame wrapped in an old dishcloth. The photo inside was from a softer year, Jodi, between Richard and me, the 3 of us leaning into a sun we didn't know was leaving. The glass was clean. The hanger on the back had come loose. The little triangle swung free, tapping like a loose tooth. Love intact, place uncertain. I set the frame on the console where a picture should go when a wall isn't ready. My money will never purchase my disappearance, I said to the room. The kettle had reheated a faithful hum. I drafted questions for the planner. Who signed your contract? What is your payment policy if a third party is mentioned but not named? Do any vendors have assumed authorization clauses? I rehearsed them once not for power, but for precision, until they felt like puzzle pieces that already knew where they fit. I added a final one. If my name appears nowhere, why did this arrive at my home? The rain ticked lightly a fingernail on glass. I opened my email and created a draft with the subject line, Contract Clarifications, Kelly Farouk. I attached nothing. Paper speaks better in person. I typed the Bellevue address into a sticky note and pressed it to my wallet. Then I set an alarm, rinsed out the towels, and left the sleeve with the invoice on the table, where morning could find it again without searching. As I turned off the light, the room trimmed itself to shapes. I knew by heart the rectangle of the stove, the soft square of the chair, the patient shine of the console. In the dark window, my reflection nodded back like we had finally agreed on something simple. Tomorrow I would ask one question. Paper can't dodge who signed and who pays. Bellevue's rain fell in tidy lines on glass. I stepped off the 5N50, shook my umbrella twice, and kept the street off their marble. The lobby smelled like gardenias and toner. A receptionist slid a visitor badge toward me. Mora, I said, pinning it to my damp coat. The clock read 2:14. I touched the notepad in my bag. Questions, numbered copies, ready, calm on purpose. Ms. Kelly, I'm Lacey. Her shoes made no sound on the floor. She offered a practiced, cordial smile. We left our weather on the rug and walked to a glass room where white lilies tried to dominate the air. Outside, rain kept time. Inside, the HVAC hummed like a held breath. I did not sit until she gestured. Boundaries have choreography. Before we begin, I said, setting my folder down, I'd like the master contract, the page naming the client of record scope retainer, schedule and due dates. Of course. Lacey slid a printout across the table. The contract wore authority neatly serif font-numbered sections, initials at the bottom. Jodi A. Kelly and Adnan S. Farouk. Section 1.1, parties I read. Client Kelly Farouk. Planner Lassie Bray Events. LLC I tapped. Section 4.2, payments retainer received, installments due per schedule. I laid my sticky note beside it, who signs pays. If I didn't sign it, I said evenly, I won't pay it. Lacey nodded the professional nod that accepts a sentence without agreeing to the world behind it. We planned for family support, she said. But yes, the couple is our client of record. I'll need the vendor roster and due dates for each line item. I said, catering venue rentals, florals, band photography transportation. Names deposits, receive balances, owed deadlines. She produced a second sheet columns of vendors with tidy amounts. I photographed the page and asked for the PDF spelling my address slowly. My pen moved with the patience of balancing a checkbook. As per your authorization email, Lassie added lightly, we were expecting the next transfer by Friday. My what? I kept it small, as if I'd misheard. Your authorization, she said. The email indicating you'd handle the major payments. I set my pen parallel to the page. Please print that with the full header originating address, timestamp, server path, and CCs. For a moment, the lilies were the only things breathing. Lacey rose. I'll have our coordinator pull it. The printout arrived warm. Subject Maura Kelly will be handling wedding payments. Sender a Gmail address that isn't mine. The body used my name in the third person and never signed it the way I sign anything official. I circled the sender and underlined the sentence that volunteered my wallet. Append this to your file as client-provided instruction, I said, distinct from my consent. Lacey recalibrated by a degree. Our deposits from the couple are modest, she said. Most balances are due closer to the reception. Vendors will pause services if funds aren't in by deadlines. Good, I said. Paper should stop what paper started. I opened my pad to a clean sheet. My position in writing and out loud, I'm not a party to your contract. I will not make or promise payment verbally. Any financial communication from me will be in writing from my address signed and dated, limited to the scope of my words. You may rely on nothing else. Understood, Lassie said. Business turns heat into math. I'll need a contact sheet for each vendor and a summary of policies, what triggers a pause, how notice must be served, and what constitutes receipt. She slid a stapled packet toward me. I scanned venue requires certified mail for cancellations. Caterer accepts notice by email, plus a follow-up call. Band needs retainer 5 business days before the event. I circled business days and close of business and wrote interpretation risk in the margin. If balances do not arrive, I asked, will you communicate that status directly to your client of record? Yes, she said, immediately. Then we're finished. I stacked the packet, slid the printout beneath my sleeve protector, and clipped everything square. Thank you for your time. I won't need a follow-up. Back in the lobby, I returned the badge, opened my umbrella, and stepped into good, honest rain. Not a party, I said to the weather, hearing how plain it sounded. On the bus, I outlined my next step in the margin of the vendor list. Serve a notarized notice of no financial responsibility to the planner, the venue, and the caterer observing their policy windows. Attach the bogus email as Exhibit A and my statement as Exhibit B. Send by certified mail where required, by email with read receipts where allowed, by both where wise. Keep copies. Date everything. Make paper do what it's built to do. Speak precisely without a tremor. Back in Ballard, I confirmed the notary opened at 9, and the USPS kiosk printed certified labels until 10. I drafted the notice language plain and unfancy. I am not a party. I have not authorized payment. Any assumption to the contrary is refuted. Direct all invoices to the client of record. I saved the file and printed 2 clean copies for signature. I set the folder on my kitchen table beside a dry towel and the framed photo I hadn't rehung. The glass caught evening light in a line. Contracts or lines step inside them or don't, and I wouldn't. Tomorrow I will let the paper speak for me in the precise language contracts respect. The notary's stamp clicked down like a small gavel, and the room seemed to exhale with it. I'd been up since first light in Ballard rewriting until the sentences felt level under my thumb. I am not a party to any contract. I do not accept financial liability. All future communication must be in writing. At the footer, I listed the exhibits, section 1.1 of the agreement naming Jodi and Adnan as clients of record, and the printed email with full headers that used my name in the third person as if I dictated it from a distance. I printed 3 originals and slid them still warm into a manila folder labeled in neat block letters. Notice no financial responsibility. The notary desk sat inside a small shipping store on 24th, the kind with bubble wrap in obedient rows, and a bell that chimed twice when I stepped in. The clerk wore a moss-green cardigan and the calm of someone who has watched 1,000 decisions harden into ink. She checked my license, compared my signature, and turned the page so the seal would land just clear of the text. Raise your right hand, she said, half formal, half friendly. I did feet, flat, shoulders square. The stamp pressed and clicked one clean sound that said, enough. I asked for 2 notarized copies and a digital scan. She nodded, moved with practiced economy, and slid me a receipt I initialed next to the fee. Before I left, I traced the embossed circle with one fingertip. The impression was sharp. So was I. At the USPS a few blocks north, rain stitched the sidewalk into a gray ribbon. The clerk peeled 3 certified labels as if handing me seedlings. Return receipt, she asked. For all 3, I answered. Keys tapped. A printer. Side and warm tracking slips slid into her palm. I placed each label, smoothed the seams, and photographed every envelope with its number visible. On the lobby bench, under a bright poster of passports and P.O. box hours, I attached the PDF packet and sent 3 emails planner venue caterer with the same subject line and the numbers typed exactly, notice of no financial responsibility Mora. Last tracking. Jomsandalme. I CC'd myself because papers should travel in pairs. Back home, I turned my small desk into a command center. A fresh spreadsheet weighted with columns for recipient time sent, tracking response and policy window. I logged the minute each message left my outbox and the moment each auto-reply came back. Lacey the planner wrote, "Received," appended to client file. Zara at the venue replied with courtesy and clarity balances due before services. Absent funds services pause. Savannah at the caterer responded briskly. Payment in full required prior to delivery. I saved every note, named every file with the date and the sender, and felt the air in the room grow orderly. By noon, the montage began. A band manager left a message that sounded like a weather report. Balance due 7 business days prior. Without it, we will not load in. The rental company texted wire must clear 24 hours before dispatch. The florist added a sugar line. We love celebrations followed by the quiet blade, but cannot release product without payment. Each snippet arrived with a timestamp. I saved audio files into a voicemail subfolder, screenshotted the texts, and named them by sender because names matter when people forget yours. In the stillness between pings, I washed 2 mugs, wiped the sink dry, and listened to the house breathe. My hands kept their rhythm while my mind stayed on clauses. Close of business days, notice deemed received. I drafted tomorrow's follow-ups, a brief note asking each vendor to restate their pause policies in writing and to confirm exactly where legal notices must be served. I added 1 sentence to all of them. For clarity, this correspondence is not a promise of payment. I printed the drafts and clipped them beneath a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. A small light helps when the weather refuses to clear. Mid-afternoon, a scheduler at the venue emailed a seating chart review invite for Saturday. The CC list read like a map of people I would not be sitting with, cousins, friends from graduate school. I had never met a sprinkling of vendors, and not one line that called me mom or even more a guest. Administration only. I penciled the time on my calendar anyway. Information is oxygen. Then I added a new column to the spreadsheet, next action, because order prevents panic. Under venue, I typed request copy of seating chart, confirm policy language attached to deposit schedule. As the day thinned toward dusk, my phone vibrated with a longer voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I let the transcription bloom on the screen. We're following up regarding the wedding balance. Please advise on wire timing. Without cleared funds, we will pause setup. It wasn't a threat, it was a thermostat. I saved it with the others and tagged it. No contract party in a calm, square font. I made tea, opened the folder, and reread my notice. The sentences held. They did not tremble. Neither did I. Night arrived without spectacle, which is its own mercy. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb for unknown callers and enabled voicemail transcription. In the calendar, I blocked an hour tomorrow to request each vendor's policy summary in writing and to send a short confirming note of my non-party status. I placed the tracking slips under the lighthouse magnet and slid the notarized copies into a waterproof sleeve. The drizzle outside softened to a breath you could almost ignore. I didn't. Paper had left my hands this morning with a seal and a number. By tomorrow, it would be logged where it needed to live. I shut down the laptop and stood in the kitchen doorway, a quiet place I've earned. This is what boundaries sound like. I thought not shouting, not door slamming, just the click of a stamp, the scratch of a signature, the soft rip of a label pressed flat. By the weekend, pressure would move from polite to urgent, and the seating chart would tell me in ink the place they had saved for me, if there was one at all. Either way, the record would be ready. Either way, the record would speak. Asha's text arrived at 4:07 p.m., a small flash that lifted the gray in my kitchen. The window wore a misted border. The maples outside shook out their last bright leaves. Public hours, only her message read. Then a photo resolved the lobby of Willow Creek Estate in Woodinville, all amber sconces and polite stone. In the center stood a freestanding board trimmed in brass. Across it, tidy letters announced the event and the couple's names. Zooming, Asha wrote and sent another. The second image filled the screen with rectangles and serifed labels. Family, friends out of town. Names were printed on heavy vellum. My eyes went to the tier where mothers belong. I scanned left to right, then again from the bottom up. No Mora. Asha's third photo was close enough to show the grain of the paper and the curl of a pushpin. It captured a smaller panel, tacked low right of center, overflow. Its title set in smaller type, half shadowed by a potted... I had the ordinary wish to be surprised. I let it pass like steam over the sink. Then I did what I promised myself I would do. I documented. I saved each image with the time, place, and sender and spoke the file names aloud to hear them stand. Seating, chart, overflow, Mora, last. 1607 JPG. Hearing your own name in a label you did not choose is a precise pain. Labeling it back is a steadying act. Asha sent a fourth photo. The angle said she'd lifted her phone and snapped without thinking the way you do when something stings. A shallow plastic bin sat on a folding table behind the concierge stand. Inside lay stacked badges on flimsy lanyards. Bridegroom parents of the groom-efficient photographer, catering captain. Then one that pulled the sound out of the room, finance contact Mora last. Not mom, not mother of the bride, not even guest. Finance contact as if my place in this family were a ledger line dressed up in lanyard font. I saved that photo too. I opened my spreadsheet and typed a new line in the notes, role assigned by badge, money not family. When you write a sentence like that about yourself, you either collapse or come upright. I came upright. Another image arrived, a wall placard under glass, venue policy payment deadlines. The header read, bulleted points followed in friendly language. Balances due 7 days prior to event. Services pause without cleared funds. Access to service areas requires wristband. Asha's caption said only posted by office door. I opened Lacey's PDF packet from Tuesday and compared phrasing line by line. It matched. I added an entry to the notice log, publicly posted policy confirms vendor statements. Attach photo. For a moment, I pictured driving to Woodinville. It's a short, pretty route from Ballard, over the bridge, and into tidy vines. I imagined standing in that lobby, seeing my name where they placed it, watching the badges lifted by strangers. Then I pictured myself reflected in brass and glass, a woman the venue would not know, and I let the door in my mind swing shut. My life is here in a quiet kitchen that remembers how to hold me. Spectacle does not suit me. Paperwork does. I composed a short email to Lacey subject line for the file. I attached the images and wrote images. Attached confirm my assigned non-familial role. My notice stands. No scolding, no italics. I thanked her for appending documents without comment and hit send. A minute later, her auto reply arrived, received, filed to couple's record. Asha texted, "That's all I can get without a wristband. You okay?" I answered, "I am now. Head home." Outside, rain began again, the kind that sows the light to the street. I took the printed invoice from the drawer where I keep warranties and wills and laid it next to the badge photo. Together they made a diptych, what they asked of me and what they called me when I gave it. I made my list for morning, keys, access cards, any borrowed assumptions. I slid a thin envelope onto the entry table and tucked in a clean copy of my notarized notice seal, crisp and centered. If a door is labeled with my name only when my hand is needed to open it, that is not my door. If a table has space for me only at the vendor meal, that is not my table. My job is not to argue with signs. My job is to choose which ones I will walk past. I washed my plate and watched the water curl toward the drain steady as a river. Water does not ask rock to soften. It passes until the rock admits the truth. There was a time I mistook noise for power. These days, I prefer proof. Dignity likes documents. So do I. Before bed, I set 2 reminders in my phone, review vendor deadlines, and return keys, access, in writing. I turned the screen face down and listened to the house perform its nightly recital. The heater's first sigh, the window's faint tick, the polite clink of the cooling kettle. In the dark, I pictured the board again and the overflow corner with its fern. There is no fern in my kitchen. There is a lighthouse magnet that holds a notice with my signature and a date. I prefer lighthouses. Tomorrow, I would return what used to be mine to lend calmly on paper on record. What I hold access to, I will hand back without ceremony. They can call me what they like in public. At my own table, I will keep my name. I slept with the rain ticking like a metronome. The envelope on my entry table was thin and neat, the way boundaries should be. I laid the spare house key on the counter, wiped it dry, and felt the old shape of obligation leave my palm. Beside it, the canceled add-on card sat in 2 stiff pieces, the strip cleanly severed. I printed a single-page copy of my notarized notice and slid everything into place. On the top margin in my even hand, I wrote one line, "Returning access I no longer hold." I photographed the contents and the sealed flap and filed. Midday in Ballard is quiet when the fishing boats are out. I chose that hour on purpose. I drove the short route to Jodi and Adnan's townhouse with the radio off and the heater low, steadied by the small sound of tires over wet seams. I parked a half block away, walked the last stretch, and set the envelope squarely on their porch, the address facing up. No bell, no note beyond the one already inside. I stepped back, raised my phone, and took a single thought. Back home, I made tea and sat with the practical work of making a life feel like mine again. First, banking. I opened the credit union app, cut the old PIN that had traveled too many places, and chose a new one that meant something only to me. I confirmed the add-on card was deactivated, then removed every autopay profile tied to my name. 6 months of statements came down as PDFs into a fresh folder. I printed the last page of each and initialed the corners, a quiet audit conducted at my kitchen table. Phone next. I set Do Not Disturb for unknown numbers and switched on voicemail transcription. Paper prefers email. I opened my inbox rules and told them how to behave filter messages from the planner and vendors into a folder called Transactions Label, all with the date star, nothing by default. I added one more instruction for myself on a sticky near the monitor. Respond in writing, not in heat. The sticky stayed. The heat did not come. At the front door, I taped a small neutral sign on the inside wood where only I would see it as I reached for the knob. No unscheduled visitors. Please email. It was a note to myself more than to anyone else, a reminder that I decide when my porch becomes my stage. I logged the day in my spreadsheet and typed the clearest sentence I could find. Access returned. Financial perimeter tightened. Late afternoon delivered the first ripple. A generic vendor voicemail landed, a brightness hung over a script about balances due 1 week prior, and a friendly suggestion to wire funds to avoid delays. I saved the audio and titled it with the time. A polite email followed asking for an updated payment contact to keep everything running smoothly. I replied with a single line linking to my notice and quoted their own policy services pause without cleared funds. Then I filed the thread and folded laundry. I cooked something simple and ate at the counter with the window cracked to the marine air. Relief is not loud. It moved through the room like fresh paint drying, changing the surface without changing the bones. I rinsed my plate and thought of the years I mistook giving for loving. If your name is invited only when money is needed, it is not your name they want. I wrote that on the day's page of my notebook, then closed it and felt the page hold. Evening tilted toward blue. I set up a slim metal tray on my desk and labeled the front lip in pencil, Domino. That's where the next things could fall. Voicemails, emails, postscripts, until they understood the new shape of the table. In my calendar, I blocked 2 hours on Friday for admin vendor policy requests and confirmed notice receipt by certified return. Around 7, another message. The florist this time cheerful and direct a reminder about final payment. A soft warning about inventory holds a link to a portal. I saved the recording, replied with the notice link, and archived the thread. The band wrote next, then the rental company, each one with the same hinge pay now or we pause. It sounded like rain finding gutters. I did not need to push. Gravity would do the work. I walked the small perimeter of my home and checked the ordinary things. A person forgets to appreciate the good lock, the sound window, the lamp with the pull chain that never snags. I set tomorrow's clothes on the chair and placed my wallet by my keys. I slid the empty envelope box away and closed the drawer. The air felt lighter, as if I had taken off a coat that was not mine to wear and hung it on the right hook in the right house with my name on the door. Before bed, I wrote a last clear line for the file. I am not a wallet. It went under the badge photo and the invoice in the binder sleeve, 3 pieces of paper that told a true story when you read them in order. I turned off the light and listened for any feeling I might have missed. Anger, pity, the old ache to be chosen first. None arrived. Only the steady tired that follows finished work. Tomorrow, other people's deadlines would collide with my refusal to be erased, and the first tiles would start to tip. My job would be the same as today's hold my line, keep my records, let the paper speak. I slept easily with the ocean air in the curtains, and the jar with the card fragments catching a sliver of streetlight like a small earned star. The quiet stayed for me. I woke before the neighbor's porch lights dimmed and set my desk the way a nurse lays out instruments notebook square to the keyboard pen, aligned with the trackpad phone face down volume low. I renamed today's spreadsheet tab Domino and added filters that caught the words I knew would arrive. Balance, wire, hold, pause. Unknown numbers slid to voicemail. The transcription window hovered at the edge of my screen like a docklight in fog. On a white note card, I wrote again the sentence that kept me steady. If I didn't sign it, I don't pay it. The first message landed a little after 10, polite vowels from the florist rising through the tinny speaker. The transcription misspelled their name, but the math was clear delivery window confirmed for Saturday. Balance required by 5 p.m. today, or we retain inventory. I saved the audio, tagged it with the time, and typed the phrasing into the log exactly as it was spoken. Then I opened a blank email, attached my notarized notice as a PDF, and pasted a single line. I am not a party to this contract. Harlow from the band called next. Their voice was kind, like someone used to smoothing wrinkled schedules with compliments and workarounds. Still, the words were the same hinge I'd heard all week, no load-in without cleared funds, 24 hours prior. I archived the voicemail and drafted a neutral reply with the notice again underlining the clause in their terms that defined client of record. I flagged their row amber red and made a small note on the side likely pause. Asha texted a half hour later. Want me to keep eyes on venue prep, I replied. Only from public space. Keep timestamps. By early afternoon, the caterer shifted the tone from polite to procedural. Savannah's email was brisk and complete, a front desk pro who had said this 100 times and would say it 100 more. The head count, the rentals, the staff call sheet, the rule printed twice in bold payment in full prior to delivery. Her voicemail matched the text and added a final line. I appreciated for its clarity no delivery without cleared funds. I forwarded the message to my file and cross-referenced it with the photo I had from the venue wall in Chapter 4. Pressure has a sound when you refuse to wear it. It hums around the edges, trying to decide whether to become threat or pleading. I answered none of it with my voice. Instead, I color-coded. Florist stayed amber, band tilted red. Catering slid fully into red with a note that read deliveries contingent on wire. See policy. I attached contract excerpts beside each row so the grid itself could explain the day back to me later. The phone buzzed and stilled, buzzed and stilled. I let the minutes pass through them without invitation. In the late afternoon, Lacey sent what planners send when the picture refuses to sharpen vendors' report balances pending. Services may pause without funds. Neutral, almost gentle, like a hand at the small of a back, guiding a crowd toward the exit. I forwarded it to my proof folder and poured fresh coffee. Through the window, the sky had that gray Seattle way of threatening rain without the energy to produce it. I breathed into the quiet and thought about thresholds. Some doors you close with a slam, some you simply lock and walk away. By dusk, the street was calm enough to hear the dry rustle of a squirrel in my neighbor's maple. I placed the note card in the center of the desk, the sentence facing up where I could not pretend to forget it. If I didn't sign it, I don't pay it. I checked the lock on my front door and taped a small note inside the same one as yesterday. No unscheduled visitors, please email. I unplugged the landline because sometimes the simplest boundaries are literal. Then I wrote myself a line in the log I wanted to see first thing tomorrow. They did not come that night. The messages slowed to 3-dot pauses and subject lines that tried on the shape of urgency. I was not the shape that fit. I stacked the day's printouts, clipped them, and slid the packet into the tray I had labeled Domino. On top, I set the photo of the badge from the estate, the one that called me finance contact, and the first envelope from Ballard with its wrong salutation, a diptych, a translation, what they named me and what I chose. I rinsed the mug and left it upside down. When I turned off the lamp, the room held its outline softer, but intact. The little desk, the faithful spreadsheet, the note card like a small flag in light wind. Tomorrow would be louder. That is what happens when paper says no and time keeps walking. If they chose my doorstep for answers, I knew exactly what they would find. The same truth I had already mailed printed, clean and clipped, ready to be received by the person who needed to learn how signatures work. I slid the note card into the top of the file drawer. I turned the deadbolt, washed my hands, and let quiet make its case for patience. Tomorrow the paper would speak. I would answer in the language it knew. So. I watched their shapes blur in the peephole before the rain sharpened them. Adnan's coat shone with beads of water. Jodi's mascara traced faint shadows under her eyes. I slid the chain, opened the door, the width of my palm, and let the hallway light stop at the threshold. The rule, quiet and old as common sense, repeated itself in my chest. No hallway performance, no raised voices, document, don't debate. Mom, please, Jodi began pitching her voice into the narrow space as if gentleness could widen it. The vendors are calling. The band can't load in. We just need you to cover the balances tonight. It's all arranged. Adnan nodded, rain tapping his collar. Wire it. We'll settle up after the honeymoon. My hands stayed easy at my sides. I did not sign your contracts, I said, keeping my tone low enough to belong to indoor air. I will not pay your balances. I held up a slim page already familiar to both of us, the notarized notice and the printed vendor policies I'd photographed on a wall neither of them had read. Your planners and vendors have these on file. Jodi's mouth tightened. You said you wanted to support us. I did not answer the rewrite. I slid a thin envelope through the gap. Inside sat another copy of my notice, and on plain paper, the photo of the badge someone had printed at the venue finance contact, my name beneath it like a job I hadn't applied for. I don't fund what erases me, I said. The sentence felt like a level set on a tool bench, clean, true, unshakable. Adnan tried logistics. People flew in. My parents are at the hotel. Do you want us humiliated? I want you paid up, I answered, still even. Services pause without payment. Your contracts say so. Mine say nothing because I have none with you. Jodi shifted to the script where daughters live when the ground moves. It's my wedding day. The words carried a childhood's worth of weather and also a grown woman's choice. You're ruining it. I shook my head once. Belonging is not a bill you hand your mother. I did not step forward. I did not step back. I let the truth take up the space that pleading wanted. If your vendors need direction, have them contact the signatories of record. She reached for sentiment again and found only paper. You could make this go away. I already did, I said. For me. The hallway hummed with the building's heat. Somewhere below, a second-floor door clicked shut. The stairwell sighed. Rain stitched a steady line on the awning over their heads. I could have filled the silence with old ache, the kind that makes mothers bargain with versions of their children who no longer exist. I did not. I rested my fingers on the edge of the door and counted one breath the way the clinic taught me after Richard died in for 4 hold for 4 out for 6. Adnan frowned at the envelope he now held as if paper might change weight with staring. "This is extreme. This is adult," I said. "You chose a celebration you cannot fund. You chose to invite my money and not my presence. I am choosing to end that arrangement." Jodi blinked hard, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to slip her hand into mine when the movie got loud. I set that memory gently where it belonged in the past, not in this hallway. "If you change your minds about who belongs," I added, "that's a conversation. Money is not." She said my name without the old softness. "Mora." I met her gaze through the narrow opening. "Daughter." I let the word stand on its full height. Not debtor, not customer, not clerk. Down the hall the elevator chimed. Adnan drew himself taller. "We'll tell people you canceled. Tell them the truth I said. You planned a reception you could not pay for, and the vendors enforced your agreements." Jodi's mouth opened, then closed. The rain ticked louder. Somewhere a timer buzzed and stopped. We had reached the end of what language could rearrange. I signaled the close. "Good night, if there's anything else, email." I eased the door toward the frame. I won't be opening for more talking. "Mom," I did not answer the name. The door met the jamb with a calm domestic sound. I engaged the deadbolt. I wrote the time on a sticky note and placed it on the day's log boundary delivered in person. No escalation. The kettle clicked off. I lifted it, poured water over a tea bag, and watched the color bloom like a slow bruise in reverse, dark to amber, then steady gold. I did not check my email until the cup was too warm to hold by the sides. When I did, the subject line waited in all caps, "Services paused for non-payment." I filed it under what it was, confirmation, not catastrophe, and closed the laptop. The apartment held its shape, books in their places, shoes under the bench, the proof folder where I left it. Outside, the rain did its necessary work on a city that forgets and remembers in turns. Inside, the air was quiet enough to keep my promise, the one I made to myself the day the wrong salutation arrived. I will not pay to disappear. The phone buzzed again and went still. I let stillness win. I rinsed the cup, left it to dry, and turned off the light in the entry. The dark took the room gently, not as erasure, but as rest. Tomorrow the system would knock not my child. Clocks and contracts have a way of calling themselves to order. I would answer the same way I had tonight, without spectacle, with paper, and with the kind of love that no longer confuses rescue with respect. Truly. The subject line blinked like a hazard light on my screen. "Services paused for non-payment." 3 replies already sat beneath it. Venue, caterer, band, each clipped and professional. I moved the kettle off the burner, slid my legal pad beside the laptop, and wrote a title across the top, "Mic Drop System." The apartment was warm. Outside, Ballard rain stitched the dark. I took a steadying breath and opened the thread from the top, not to savor anything, but to read it like a map. Lacey, the planner, wrote first. She quoted the contract by number and line deposit, acknowledged balances past due, services will pause without cleared funds. No flourish, no plea. Below that, she listed delivery windows, the florist's load in the band's arrival, the kitchen's prep. At the bottom, a small sentence I had asked to see in writing notice from Mora on file, status non-disputed. I highlighted 3 phrases on screen and dictated them into my log. Zara from the venue replied with policy language I'd seen on a wall photo, load in contingent on proof of payment 24 hours prior. She attached a 1-page service pause notice addressed to the clients of record Jodi and Adnan. No mention of me. I saved it as venue Hasikraned pause notice. Timestamp.tdf, filed it under reception proof policy, and drew a small square on my pad. Proof I've learned travels better when it knows where to live. Savannah at catering followed. Delivery holds until invoice paid in full, she wrote, including the balance and wire instructions. I attached the email to the spreadsheet row already marked Catering Red and matched it to the photo Asha had sent of the venue's posted policy. 2 witnesses who didn't know they were standing together. Moments later, Harlow from the band added, "No load in without wire confirmation." Schedule releases at noon if unpaid. It read like a timetable, not a threat. I answered none of them beyond one sentence I had prepared. For clarity, I am not a party to the contract. Please direct billing to the signatories of record. Boundaries are not conversations. They are statements with a place to stand. The thread thickened with acknowledgments. Lacey noted the last acceptable hour for funds and the name of the staffer holding the clipboard. She did not ask me for a solution, and she did not misname me a payor. She aligned resources to signatures, weather settling into forecast. I wrote a margin note to myself. This is not revenge. This is boundary plus policy. It looked spare on paper like a fence line on a map, but it held. I refused the little thrill that tried to rise at the words, "Services paused." There was no triumph to claim. What the emails meant was simple paper spoke where pleading would have drowned. I stood stretched, warmed my tea, and reread the thread to be sure there was no hidden hook. There wasn't. Across the room, the old photo of 3 faces leaned against the shelf. Richard on one side, me on the other. Jodi laughing between us in yellow rain boots. I didn't move it or turn it down. Love survives without being hired as staff. I added another line to the pad. Compassion for myself is not cruelty to them. It kept my hands from writing speeches no one needed. New pings arrived louder, only in bold type. Zara confirmed the halt again. Savannah reissued the invoice. Harlow repeated the noon release. Lacey replied with trimmed acknowledgments understood. Direct payment questions to clients of record. I saved each item, colored the rows amber for florist, amber red for band, solid red for catering, and closed the files. A boundary is most beautiful when it stops needing your voice. I stepped to the window. Streetlights pulled gloss out of the wet pavement. A dog shook rainwater at the corner. 2 cyclists coasted by with small red blinkers, like polite lighthouses. The night behaved like any other night, and that normalcy felt like a mercy I had earned. Back at the desk, I logged a last line for the day. All notices filed. Pauses confirmed. No action required. Then one sentence, only for me. You kept faith with yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from Asha. You'll want to see this from the kitchen captain tomorrow. No photo, no preview, just the promise of a human voice from the back of the house. I flagged the thread and closed the laptop. The badge photo lay where I had left it, the word finance, looking smaller now that everyone had agreed where responsibility lived. I rinsed the mug, turned off the lamp, and let the apartment settle into good quiet. Rain softened against the window. Somewhere across town, a seating chart curled at the corners, and a stack of place cards waited for names to find each other without a band to announce them. I thought of my daughter, not a planner's client, not the sender of invoices, but the child who once counted crows on our walks and sang about puddles. I chose to stop my thoughts there before the old ache reached for me and let the room go dim. Before bed, I opened a new draft and left it unsent. For the avoidance of doubt, I will not authorize payment, and I will not appear at the reception. It wasn't for them, it was for me, a sentence to sleep beside. Tomorrow, the next proof would not come from a brochure, but from a person who watched prep lists and clock hands. When he spoke, I wanted a clear table and a clear mind, so I turned the phone face down and let the rain finish the song. Rest. Morning light widened across my kitchen table as I opened Asha's forward. A subject line waited like a held breath for your records. The email came from the kitchen captain at Willow Creek, written in crisp sentences that sounded like someone who keeps knives sharp and timetables sharper. I did not read yet. I made a folder, first a small act of discipline reception proof /witness. Then I opened my log and typed the date, the time, and a single heading, back of house account. My pulse wanted to sprint ahead, but I made it walk. I set the kettle to low and moved the mouse with care, reminding myself that proof belongs to the page, not to my blood pressure. The apartment was quiet, except for rain tapering on the window. I clicked once, then again, and the message unfolded like a door to a hallway only staff use. I braced, then let the words come in. Key points rose in clean paragraphs. The captain described the tasting, how the bride dismissed a seasonal salad as too plain, how substitutions were demanded after the ordering window closed, how a server was snapped at for offering sparkling water instead of still. Each note was dated and timed. Twice the captain wrote the couple said, "My mother will settle everything day of." Policy was spelled out in the next line, no service without cleared funds before load-in. Then a sentence that felt like a hand laid on my shoulder, steady and professional. "Your name is listed in our internal brief as finance contact. No family designation is attached." I read that line twice, then saved the email with full headers and exported a PDF naming it Witness CCC timestamp. I placed it in the new folder and annotated my log-independent account, aligns with posted policy, mirrors planner's notice. My throat did not tighten. I took one small sip of cooling tea and let the validation settle the way rain settles into soil. A second message sat beneath the first, a short addendum stamped by the same signature. Prep staff had been instructed to hold platters at the kitchen doors until payment cleared, the note said, and a small anecdote followed during a walkthrough. The bride curled a lip at the dishwashers and laughed about people who cook not decide. The captain did not editorialize. They simply recorded the time and the words. I scrolled back to last night's chain where services paused was typed in capital letters and matched the hours. The timeline locked like a latch. Kitchen policy planner, clauses, venue signage, vendor emails, they formed a square. I forwarded Asha a thank you and one instruction: keep yourself public and safe. Do not argue with anyone. Just send time-stamped facts. Then I printed the addendum and placed it under a clip with the first note. The apartment smelled faintly of toast and steam. I felt anger press at the doorframe of my ribs, but I kept the handle turned from the inside. By early afternoon, an unknown number slid a voicemail into the pile. The transcription preview sat blunt on my screen. "She's just the checkbook. We'll make her feel bad enough to wire it." I played the audio once, then again, with my eyes closed. The voice was young, a little rushed, the kind of tone people use when they believe the person they're describing will never hear them. I saved the file to voicemail and captured the screen as a video with timestamp. I printed the transcript and dated it by hand. No reply felt necessary. None would be useful. I wrote one calm line in my log: intent to pressure via guilt. Language reduces me to funding. No response. Then I set the page beside the witness email and looked at them together, two panes of glass that made the same view sharper. Outside, a gull tilted above the canal. A neighbor's dryer thumped. I stood, stretched my back, and let the kettle hum again. The apartment held its ordinary sounds around an extraordinary certainty. I was being named as a wallet, and nothing else, and I would not purchase my disappearance. I underlined those last 6 words on my pad and boxed them. The box was not for show. It was a private oath. I combined the 2 items into a single archive labeled Witness and Intent and dragged it into the master folder. Rows on my spreadsheet gained a new tag, Witness plus Intent. I drafted a summary email to the planner that I never sent, choosing to let the system keep speaking for me. I made coffee, watered the fern, and allowed the air to be plain again. On the desk, the badge photo from the estate sat beside the transcript finance contact, facing "She's just the checkbook." Together, they told the only story that mattered now. I did not need to narrate it to anyone. I simply placed both pages into a clear sleeve, slid the sleeve into the binder, and closed the rings with a quiet click. I wrote one last line at the bottom of today's log: no escalation, no doorsteps, no speeches. Boundaries are best served on paper. Then I dated the page and initialed it the way I sign checks, carefully, legibly, and only when it is my name on the line. I took out the old family photo and set it on the closed binder, not as bait for anyone's apology, but as ballast for me. Before the week turned, I would decide what stayed on my wall and what never crossed my threshold again. I powered down the laptop and let the apartment go still, the way a stage goes dark between scenes. Tomorrow would bring the next piece, and I would place it where it belonged, quietly, precisely in the story the paper was telling. I rinsed my cup, dried it, and left it upside down to cool on the rack. Before dawn, the apartment was a gray-blue hush. I cleared a rectangle of wall in the hall where the light falls cleanest at midday. The family photo lay on the console, face down as if resting. I set a nail and a small hammer beside it, then stepped back to look at the blank space. I told myself the same thing I have told myself all week: the wall can wait, but my standards can't. If something comes into this home, it earns its place. Respect first, roles second. The kettle clicked. I left the frame exactly where it was, a promise I would keep after today's work was done. At 8:02 a.m., my inbox chimed with a subject line that read like a countdown clock. Final payment due by 12. 0 p.m. services cancel if unpaid. Lacey's paragraphs were tight and professional clause numbers stitched in like seams. The CC list ran long venue caterer band. Each confirmed what I already knew from their posted policies: deposits, received balances, outstanding services, pause without cleared funds. I opened my spreadsheet and gave the day a name: Final Clock. I copied the exact language into my notes, set a neutral timer for 11:55, and wrote one line at the top of the page: policy not anger. When the timer rang, I would not flinch. Paper would do the speaking. At 12:07 p.m., the strike came. Zara sent the venue's formal letter: final cancellation for non-payment, addressed to Jodi and Adnan, clients of record. The PDF was clean and cold: date, release deposit, forfeited load-in, canceled, each point tethered to a posted rule. I saved it into reception. Proof, cancellation, and added a note in plain words for my own sake. Outcome triggered by contract terms, not by me. The relief I felt wasn't triumph, only the steady exhale of a promise kept. I had refused to bankroll my own erasure. The system drew the line exactly where it said it would, with a timestamp instead of a raised voice. By early afternoon, spin began to whirl where policy had landed. A group text buzzed with cousins and aunties. Why would you pull funding? Couldn't this wait? Screenshots showed Jodi's version, neat as a bow, leaving out the parts that didn't flatter. I put the phone face down and exported a private bundle of documents: notice, policy photos, pause, emails, cancellation, PDF, then archived the file where only I could see it. Asha texted briefly: kitchen quiet. Staff released early. I replied, thank you for the timestamp. Go rest. I did not push the story anywhere. I did not answer for anyone. Silence can be noisy if you use it to punish. Mine was simply a closed ledger. When the apartment settled again, I lifted the frame. The picture isn't a spell. It cannot remake the day or the past. But it is a record that I once stood in the center of a life I helped build. I tapped the nail into the painted plaster, felt the small resistance, and hung the frame level. No pleading at that wall, no bargain with memory. Just a photograph in a hallway I pay for, under a roof I keep. I made tea and opened my notebook. Under the date I wrote, I won't pay to be erased. Beneath it, paper spoke. I listened. Then I backed up my files and locked the drawer. The afternoon thinned until the sky looked rinsed. One more email arrived. Guests are asking what happened. I closed the laptop without answering. The answer belongs to the people who sign their names and miss their clocks. Outside, a neighbor carried groceries up the stairwell, bags rustling like dry leaves. I slipped on a jacket and stepped out for air, passing the wall as I went. The photo held its place. The nail held. So did I. I parked 2 blocks away and watched the lot fill with pressed suits and puzzled faces as the staff rolled carts back inside. The wipers kept a patient rhythm, smearing the last drizzle into soft streaks. Willow Creek's portico shone like a postcard flower earns brass lanterns, a runner taped just so, except the motion around it was wrong. Musicians lifted cases out, then put them back. A floral rack turned like a slow carousel and disappeared through a service door. I texted Asha one line, public vantage only, timestamps, and she sent back a thumbs up. I sat low in the driver's seat and kept my hands still on the wheel. The air smelled like wet cedar and engine heat. I wasn't there to take anything back. I was there to make sure I didn't give anything away. Guests drifted toward the entry in clusters, smoothing jackets, checking phones. A pair of valets stood under the awning with nothing to do but trade keys and shrug. The murmur had the tone I remember from delayed flights, hopeful, then irritated, then hushed. Women in heels picked their steps across damp lines of gravel. Men in blue suits pulled at cuffs and scanned the foyer for someone with authority. Venue staff formed small, calm triangles with families near the stone columns, heads tipped in listening posture. No one raised a voice. It was the choreography of a pause, not a brawl. I glanced at the time and wrote it down in my log. Policy, not people, was doing the talking. Asha's first clip arrived a wide shot from the public path outside the hedges, the foyer framed like a stage, the audio, a quilt of whispers and rain. Zara stepped just to the threshold clipboard against her black blazer and read from a page that looked like every page we'd seen this week, dates, amounts, consequences. Services are paused for non-payment by the clients of record, she said, clear and even. The words landed like a dull bell. No drama, just the sound of metal on metal. A hush flattened the crowd. Then the ripples' heads bent over screens, thumbs flying a cousin, pulling an aunt toward the side to read a thread aloud, someone hugging a grandmother whose hat was not made for weather like this. One man cracked a joke too loud and then apologized into his own hand. Asha's second clip showed a violin case going back into a trunk and the band rep quietly relabeling a cart. In my car, I kept my spine against the seat and my palms flat. I am not the show, I reminded myself. I am a witness to the clock. Then the heat rose. Asha's next video slid into my messages. Jodi, eyes bright and tired, stepping forward at the edge of the public line, Adnan just behind. The camera caught only what anyone could see from outside the hedge bodies, angled hands cutting the air, the posted policy sign about no load-in without cleared funds framed over Zara's shoulder. The audio lifted a clean slice. My mother pulled out Jodi said voice pinched on the last word. Zara didn't tilt, didn't sway. Our clients are Jodi and Adnan. She replied the syllables gentle and immovable at once. Adnan tried logistics. We said we'd cover day of and a staff lead not unkindly pointed at the sign. Asha's timestamp ribboned across the bottom of the frame like a seal. I saved all 3 clips into reception-proof day of and labeled them while my chest did what it would hurt, then settle. In the 4th clip, a guest in a navy dress touched Jodi's elbow, and for a moment my throat closed. Compassion doesn't need an invitation. It arrives because you're still human. I breathed once and turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. A parking attendant in a yellow vest waved me through with a small nod that said he understood more than he was going to say. I eased past the curb where the runner wrinkled back on itself like a tongue and slid into the slow river of cars that always gathers on event roads when the event refuses to begin. No victory lap, no message sent. I repeated my single line for the day, quieter than a prayer I don't pay to be erased. At the first turn, I dictated into my phone. Outcome witnessed. Announcement referencing non-payment to clients of record. Attempted blame shift corrected by posted policy. No contact initiated, no statements made. The memo stored itself with the calm click of a drawer. Traffic thinned as Woodinville gave way to highway. The clouds lifted into a bright overcast, the kind of light photographers beg for. If I had wanted a moment of triumph, the day would have offered 1 headlines in a family thread and I told you so to a neighbor, a sigh I could throw into the world like confetti. Instead, I rolled down the window 2 inches and let clean air cut the car's warmth. The truth was already where it needed to be in the documents on the sign, in the recording of a staff member who chose to be precise instead of kind. Precision had been my ally all week. It did not fail me now. At a red light near the river, my phone pulsed. Asha. "Do you want me to send the raw files now?" I answered at the green one word. "Yes." Another bubble. "Then I'm going home to sleep." "Please do," I typed back. On the next stretch, I passed a farm stand with mums, stacked like little suns, and for a breath, I let myself imagine buying two, one for my porch, one for Asha's, a thank you, without a speech. The light changed and the farm fell behind. The road curved toward the city, toward my apartment, with the quiet hallway and the frame newly hung. By the time Ballard's drawbridge lifted for a boat, the day had settled into its shape, a public reckoning that didn't need me to point at it. I pulled to the curb and watched gulls write invisible cursive over the water. My hands rested easy on my knees. Dignity is not a feeling. It's a posture you practice until it's a habit. I have had a week of practice. When the bridge lowered, I crossed and headed home. My window still cracked the air, still clean. For once, the story inside my hands felt like mine to close. Evening slid across the room like a long, exhale soft light, turning the glass of the frame into a warm square. I cleared the console the way you clear a mind, one deliberate motion at a time. The spare pens went into the ceramic cup, the mail into a neat stack, the dried sprig of lavender into the recycling because it had given all the scent it had to give. I wiped the surface, dusted the frame, measured twice for the nail, and tapped the hammer until the metal seated with a modest, competent sound. Then I lifted the photo. It was not a plea. It was not an apology. It was a record. A life I built, a home I keep, the woman I remain, whether anyone invites me to a table or not. I breathed in, stepped back, and let the room feel finished. The door stayed closed. The wall finally did not. My phone chirped like a faraway bird. The family thread had revived itself into a chorus that used my name often and my person not at all. I scrolled once, not more, through paragraphs of blame shaped like concern. Then I opened my laptop and exported the evidence bundle I had built all week, notice policies, pause emails, cancellation PDFs, and saved it to a private archive named Receipts for Me. I posted one neutral line to the thread, "Please direct billing to the signatories of record," and pressed mute for a year. It felt less like shutting a door and more like opening a window. The room brightened. The kettle burbled. I wrote a log entry with the same steadiness I'd used to hang the frame boundary held. Public narrative declined. I closed the computer and let the apartment hum with small good noises, the clock, the heat vent, the rain loosening into mist. Asha called while the steam curled from my mug. "Kitchen captain says, 'Thank you,'" she said, voice mellow with a tired smile. He asked if I'd consider a paid project, photos and short videos of service teams, real work, no staged nonsense. He wants timestamps. He liked my restraint. I could hear the gratitude in her breath, and something else relief, maybe that adulthood didn't require a costume. "2 rules if you take it," I said. "Public vantage. Timestamps always." She laughed. "Those are my favorite 2 rules. We talked about rates and permissions and how to say no when a client asked for access that didn't belong to them. When we hung up, I realized hope had quietly moved houses. It no longer lived in the part of my heart that kept trying to renovate other people. It had rented a bright little place in the part that builds with whoever shows up and treats me like a person. I opened the locked drawer. Inside, my week arranged itself in tidy proof statements, archived in date order, add-on card fragments asleep in a glass jar, pin change confirmations clipped with a tiny binder, the color of nickel. The spare keys hung on my own hook by the door, not on anyone else's edges, cool as certainty. I pulled a small card from the desk, wrote 1 sentence in plain block letters, and taped it to the inside of the cabinet, where only I would see it. When I reached for tea, "I don't pay to be erased." I said it once in an ordinary voice that didn't need to audition for anyone. It fit in my mouth like a truth I'd known for years and had finally chosen to keep. Sleep came clean and stayed the night. In the morning, the sky over Shil's Hole wore a pale band of silver, and the gulls argued softly with the tide. I walked the path with my hands in my jacket and the air working the last ache out of my lungs. A couple passed with a thermos and a dog who believed it owned the water. A line of rowers cut the bay like a zipper. I texted an old friend coffee this week. She replied with 2 times and a heart that didn't need an explanation. On the way home, I stopped at the kiosk and signed up for a volunteer orientation at the Maritime Museum, the one where they let you tell stories about the boats to kids who think every horizon is a promise. At my kitchen counter, I opened the calendar and wrote Sunday dinner with neighbors, bring cobbler. Love is a budget. I set the numbers where they make sense toward people who show up toward places that make me kinder toward work that outlives a single weekend in Woodinville. By late afternoon, the apartment had the peace of a library after closing. I tidied the reception-proof folder into an external drive and labeled it with the quiet accuracy that guided me all week. It was history now, not a habitat. Asha sent a final text, raw files delivered. Napping. I answered with a thumbs up and the word proud, which covered more than her new opportunity. It covered the careful way she had kept herself out of the mess while keeping the record clean. The family thread somewhere inside its own storm continued without me. I didn't look. I didn't need to. Paper had spoken where I could not. Silence held where noise would have invited me back into roles I no longer rent. Evening settled again softer this time. I set the kettle on and listened for the tiny crescendo just before the whistle, that heartbeat of heat becoming voice. I walked to the hallway and looked at the photo the way you look at a horizon you've decided not to chase. The glass gave back a small version of me, silver hair, straight spine, a woman who had learned the difference between ending and closure. The door remained closed. That was not punishment. It was architecture. Not everything can come in. Not everything should. I carried my mug to the desk and opened my notebook to the last page. I wrote the line that will keep the lights on in my life when other people go dark. Paper drew the boundary. I chose the life. I dated the page because I want to remember the day choosing felt less like a fight and more like breathing. Then I turned the lamp to low, rinsed the cup, and let the sink sing its brief metallic note. The apartment was quiet, not empty. The wall was not bare. The hook held my keys. The sea kept its own counsel steady beyond the window. Tomorrow there will be coffee with a friend and forms at the museum and a list for the cobbler I promised. Tomorrow there will be ordinary chores and the good kind of tired. Tonight there is only this, the sound of rain finishing its thought, and the knowledge that what I keep and what I let go finally matches the life I intend to live. Some lessons I carry forward boundaries are love shaped like lines. Money should never purchase your disappearance. If a contract doesn't carry your signature, it shouldn't carry your soul. Paper is plain, but it protects. Silence is quiet yet strong. Choose where your love goes toward people who show up, not stories that erase you. Keep records, speak simply, and leave with dignity when respect isn't offered. What about you? Where have you drawn a line that saved your peace? If this story touched you, drop a 1 or share where you're watching from. If it didn't, tell me why. For more true human stories, please subscribe to the channel.